Sometimes I wonder if, on that very first day I stepped into that company, I had turned around and walked away, would my life have been different? Maybe I wouldn't have witnessed a family crumble under the weight of power. Maybe I wouldn't have stood in the middle of a war I never chose to fight. But fate doesn't ask for your opinion. It simply throws you into the middle of a chess game without telling you you're just a pawn. And when that woman, with no title and no official position, raised her hand, the entire company fell into silence, as if even breathing required her permission. My name is David Walker, and I'm 33 years old. I work at Carter Interiors, an interior design firm headquartered in Austin, Texas. The company was founded over 30 years ago by Charles Carter, a businessman originally from Pennsylvania. Under his leadership, it was once considered the family treasure, not just for the profits, but for the belief it inspired. People here believed in the founder. Charles was a calm man, but deeply influential. He never raised his voice, never had to slam a table or get angry. A single glance from him could silence a boardroom. Employees respected him. Partners admired him. I used to think he was the kind of boss everyone wanted. Fair, transparent, and always respectful of those beneath him. But behind him was a storm. His wife, Regina Carter, held no official role in the company, but everyone knew where the real power lay. No one said it out loud, but in hallways, elevators, and parking lots, the name Mrs. Regina was whispered with caution. She didn't manage a specific department, but was present in every strategic meeting. No one knew exactly what she did, but everyone knew if she didn't like you, you wouldn't be around for long. In the Carter family, Regina had two children, Natalie and Eric. Natalie Carter, the eldest daughter at 35, is one of the smartest and sharpest women I've ever met. She used to work at a prestigious architecture firm in Chicago before returning to the family business 4 years ago. With a professional demeanor, swift efficiency, and razor-sharp decision-making, Natalie quickly earned the trust of the staff. She wasn't the yelling type, but she was the kind of leader you'd willingly stay late for because you knew she was working twice as hard. I had the chance to work directly with her on 2 projects, and I have to admit, no one has ever impressed me like Natalie. But ironically, she's not the one holding the title of vice president. That role belongs to Eric Carter, her 29-year-old brother, best known for dropping out of college to find creative inspiration by driving cross-country in an RV. When Eric returned to the company, no one dared ask why someone with 0 management experience was suddenly made vice president. But everyone knew Regina was behind it. No one said it aloud, but every glance carried the same question. If he didn't have the last name Carter, would anyone hire him? Eric never hid the fact that he was bored by meetings or uninterested in metrics. I once saw him doze off during a quarterly strategy presentation right in front of investors. Another time, he showed up wearing a cartoon t-shirt and said, "Dressing formally kills creativity." But when Charles saw all this, he merely sighed, never said a word. Once I heard him mutter, "He'll grow up, eventually." That line sounded like both hope and helplessness. And Natalie? She never reacted, never complained, never argued. She simply kept working, shouldering tasks that rightfully belonged to her brother. But sometimes, when she walked out of a meeting, I'd catch a glimpse of sadness in her eyes, a sadness not for work, but for family. I understood that feeling. The longer I stayed with this company, the more I realized Carter Interiors wasn't just a company. It was a battlefield for a family. On one side, Charles and Natalie, the ones holding things together. On the other, Regina and Eric turning it into a playground for their own power. Me, I was just an employee. But somehow, every time I stepped into a conference room, it felt like I was watching a battle where no one truly won. Then one day, when the CEO seat went vacant, every mask fell off. And I realized I could no longer stay out of it. Ever since Charles started being absent due to health issues, the atmosphere at Carter Interiors shifted, like someone had locked all the windows shut. I don't remember when I became Team Natalie. Maybe it was that late night when I stayed behind to help her prep the presentation for a VIP client while Eric called from a bar and said, "Can't make it, handle the press briefing for me, will ya?" Or maybe it was when Natalie invited me to a private lunch and suddenly asked, "David, do you ever feel like you're rowing between 2 tides?" I forced a smile, but that question has stuck with me ever since. I'm a mid-level manager, leading a team of 6. I don't have the power to shift the company's fate, but I'm not invisible enough to fly under the radar either. In this power game, I'm an easy target. Someone who could be pulled to either side or sacrificed at any moment. Things got tense when Charles was rushed to the hospital after a minor stroke. Within a week, Regina started showing up at the office daily, though she'd only visited occasionally before. The coffee was changed to her preferred brand. Office chairs were swapped out for ones with higher backs. Charles's office was locked and labeled, under renovation. Eric was officially appointed interim CEO, a decision that needed no announcement, just Regina's nod. The all-hands meeting on Monday morning was cold as ice. Eric wore a suit, tie slightly askew like a kid playing dress-up, and stepped onto the stage. I know people are uncertain right now, but as interim CEO, I want to assure you I'll carry on my father's legacy, in my own way. His eyes scanned the front row. I caught his empty stare and let out a quiet sigh. A lone clap echoed from the left row. Kyle, the guy Natalie once fired for stealing project ideas, now seated beside Regina. Natalie, 2 seats from me, said nothing, but I saw her hand clenched tight, fingernails digging into her palm. Her suit was still immaculate, posture still upright, but her gaze had never been sharper. From that day on, the company split in 2. One half scrambled to curry favor with Eric. Those once deemed incompetent were now made managers. The other half stayed silent and got noticed for it. I didn't do anything wrong, but the fact that Natalie had nominated me for a promotion last year became the excuse. I was suddenly removed from major meetings. My emails were ignored. The project I led was reassigned to another team, under the excuse of organizational restructuring. One Friday afternoon, as I was preparing materials for a client, a new internal message popped up. David Walker, please report to the CEO's office at 4:30 p.m. No subject, no explanation. I swallowed hard. Another employee gave me a pitying glance. Charles's office now bore a new nameplate. Eric Carter, CEO. The lighting was soft yellow, the wallpaper freshly replaced, and Charles's photo was gone, replaced by one of Eric standing beside his mother in front of the company building. Regina sat on the sofa, sipping tea. Eric leaned against the desk as if waiting. "Hello, David." Regina spoke first, her voice soft and cold as winter air. "You've been with this company a long time, but we're entering a new era, and we need people who are aligned." I hadn't even responded when Eric cut in. "Don't take it the wrong way. This isn't a firing. We're offering early retirement, with financial support." I looked him straight in the eye. "I am 33. Regina set her teacup down and sighed. "Age is just a number, David. Some people are 33, but already outdated in their thinking." That was the moment I knew. I wasn't being pushed aside because of my competence, but because I refused to bow my head. I stood up, slowly adjusted my jacket. If I walk out of here, I won't be the one losing. I turned toward the door. But as soon as my hand touched the doorknob, a familiar voice echoed from the hallway. "You're not going anywhere." The door swung open. Natalie appeared, her eyes sharp like blades. "David stays. If someone needs to leave, I'll be the first." Eric turned pale. Regina shot to her feet. "You have no authority to interfere." Natalie gave a faint smile. "Then call a lawyer. But before you do, go check the security cameras. Since Dad left, how many documents have you and Eric signed without board approval?" I stood frozen. The floor beneath my feet felt like it shifted. Our game I thought was over had only just begun. When you clearly see something wrong but can't speak up because the person in the wrong sits at the top, that's when you realize you're trapped between 2 lines: loyalty and survival. I'd been at Carter Interiors for nearly 11 years, starting out as a clueless newbie, sweating through a meeting because I'd picked up the wrong presentation folder. I grew with this company, from the days in a small office in an old industrial park to the gleaming glass building in the heart of Austin. I'd witnessed every turning point, both the celebrations and the late-night crises. And I'd also seen the two sides form, a slow, silent fracture stretching across years. On one side was Natalie, who I always saw as the embodiment of capability and decency in a workplace. She never yelled at anyone, but she never let things slide either. If you missed a deadline, you had to explain, and you'd learn never to repeat it. Natalie was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. She knew the names of every intern and janitor. She knew who had toddlers, who just got divorced, who was taking night classes, not out of curiosity, but because she wanted to build a real workplace. I was lucky to work with her early on, and over time became someone she often called first when there was an urgent project, or when she needed someone to say it straight, no sugarcoating. That's how she described me. As for me, I just felt like I could truly be myself around her. But that closeness also made me a thorn in Eric's side. He once said straight to my face in a meeting, "David, who do you think you are, acting like you understand Natalie all the time? This is my family's company, not yours." I smiled, trying to stay calm, but something cracked inside me at that moment. He didn't want me neutral. He wanted me on my knees. Worse, once Regina started dropping by the office more often, or more accurately, blatantly interfering with personnel decisions, the atmosphere became suffocating. Those close to Natalie were reassigned, removed from major projects, or worse, reprimanded for absurd reasons. One colleague of mine, Amy, the lead designer on our team, was written up for not pleasing Eric's artistic vision with her showroom concept. He couldn't tell the difference between minimalism and brutalism, but still critiqued her sketches like he was Frank Gehry reincarnated. Amy requested a 3-week leave afterward due to unexplained fatigue. Everyone knew why. I tried to stay composed, kept my head down, but I knew I'd been on the unspoken blacklist for a long time. I wasn't stupid enough to openly oppose Eric or his mother, but I couldn't pretend to praise poor decisions either. I once tried offering feedback during a planning meeting for the new branch office. I think making neon colors the central theme might not align with Carter Interior's brand identity. Eric squinted. "Thanks for the outdated opinion, David. You think we should just stay stuck in 2010 forever?" The room went silent. Regina gave a slight chuckle, then resumed tapping her nails on the table. A soft sound, but it felt like it was tapping the back of my skull. That was the moment I realized I was no longer allowed to speak honestly. I was only allowed to exist if I kept my head down. I started being excluded from key meetings. My emails were ignored. Projects I managed were reassigned without explanation. Even someone on my team was suddenly promoted to my level. Eric, special recognition for their youthful vision. Natalie saw it all, but she said nothing. Only her eyes, every time she looked at me, carried a burden of guilt. "I'm sorry, David," she whispered once when we stood alone in the elevator. "I can't protect you anymore. I don't have that power now." I nodded. "I understand, but I'm not leaving. Not yet." Because I knew Charles was still the CEO, and he trusted me. In the midst of all the chaos, there was only one place I still felt like myself: the chess room in Charles's office. He loved chess, and I was the only person in the company who could hold a draw against him. Every week, after hours, we'd sit together, sip Earl Grey, and play in silence. No Regina, no Eric, no politics, just chess. And respect. Once, I asked him, "Have you never thought of handing the company to Natalie?" He looked at me for a long time before answering. "I have, but I'm afraid it would tear my family apart." I didn't know what to say. But when I saw his eyes, tired, silent, filled with a sorrow I couldn't describe, I understood. He had chosen to sacrifice what was right to preserve what he thought was greater, but wasn't. And I also understood, at some point the wrong moves would have to be paid for. I just didn't know if I was ready to witness it. Nightmares don't always arrive with screams. Sometimes they come in silence and shake the whole building. I remember that morning clearly. It was a gloomy Wednesday, and the Austin sky felt like it was warning us something was coming. I was making coffee in the second-floor break room when a shout echoed from the executive wing hallway. "Call an ambulance, Mr. Charles collapsed." I dropped my mug and ran toward the commotion. The CEO's office door was wide open. Charles was slumped over his desk, face pale, eyes closed, his shirt soaked in sweat. Natalie was cradling his head, hands trembling. Eric stood nearby, his face white as paper, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, he was still semi-conscious, but I clearly heard a weak sentence slip from his lips. Don't let him. No one knew what he meant, but I knew he wasn't rambling. Charles never said anything without purpose. After the ambulance disappeared around the corner, the office fell into a chilling silence. No one worked. No one spoke. Everyone just looked at each other, worried. 3 hours later, a company wagon internal email was sent out. CEO Charles Carter is currently in critical condition at St. David's Medical Center. During his absence, Eric Carter will serve as acting CEO. I read that line over and over. A lump formed in my throat. Not Noachley, not the veteran executive, not the senior advisor. It was Eric, the guy who couldn't remember his own email password without his assistant. From that moment on, I knew everything was about to change, and not for the better. That afternoon, the third-floor office, the strategic division, was nearly empty. I saw Natalie sitting alone in a meeting room, staring out the window, her shoulders no longer held high like they used to be. I knocked, stepped in, and sat silently across from her. "Is it true?" I asked. "Yes. My mother nominated Eric during an emergency family meeting. I didn't have the right to object." "You didn't protest?" "I did, but she looked me in the eye and said, 'This is not the time to divide the family.'" Natalie let out a dry, weary laugh. "What are you going to do?" "I'm staying, at least until my father wakes up, even if I have to stand alone." I didn't say anything more, just nodded, because I wasn't sure how much longer either of us could stand. 2 days later, Eric walked into the office in a brand new suit, hair slicked back with gel. He called an all-hands meeting for the first time as acting CEO. Everyone gathered in the main hall. Natalie stood beside her brother, eyes cold, face emotionless. Eric took the microphone, forcing a smile. "I know many of you are worried, but I believe we can get through this difficult time. Trust the leadership, and especially trust me. In this new role, I'll lead Carter Interiors into a new era. We won't keep repeating the same old patterns." As I clenched my fists, the people near me whispered, "A new era? And he doesn't even know how to turn on the projector?" The meeting ended with a few scattered claps, mostly from the staff known to be close to Regina. That evening, I got the first news. Lucas, the head of engineering, who had openly rejected Eric's neon lights idea, was reassigned to logistics. No announcement, no reason. The next morning, Jenna from HR was suspended for violating internal procedures, even though just 3 days earlier the former CEO had publicly praised her. Then came Ben, Chloe, Tracy. All of them had worked directly with Natalie. One person per week, quietly, no noise. But everyone knew the purge had begun, and the list was growing by the day. I started feeling isolated too. My emails went unanswered. I was excluded from meetings. The documents I used to handle were now reassigned to others. The pressure was rising. Like a frog in warm water, unaware it's being boiled. I confronted Natalie that Friday afternoon. "Am I next?" I asked. "I don't know." Her eyes were red. "If I get fired, will you regret it? If I don't stand up, I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I was silent for a while, then said, "If that happens, let me walk out as the only one who didn't bow his head." She didn't reply, but I saw her lips tremble. A week later, I received an email from the admin office. "Please report to the CEO's office at 10 a.m. tomorrow." No subject, no explanation, but I knew my time had come. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual. As I drove, my heart pounded with every gust of wind slapping the windshield. One sentence echoed in my mind. "If today is my last day, then at least I'll walk out with my head held high." By 5 to 10, I stood in front of the familiar wooden door of the CEO's office. It had never felt so cold. My hand gripped the handle, but before I could turn it, Natalie arrived. "Let me go with you." Her voice was low but clear. I looked at her, nodded. If you come in, you might get dragged into this. I've been dragged in ever since my mother chose Eric. We stepped inside together. The CEO's office was spacious and brightly lit, but today it felt like the doors of a slaughterhouse had closed. Eric sat behind the desk, wearing a charcoal gray suit, hands resting on the table as if mimicking a pose of authority he picked up from some YouTube tutorial. To his right was Reed, Regina's personal assistant, who always looked at others like they were unqualified to exist. Further back sat Regina, legs crossed, idly twisting her wedding ring, as if signaling that today everything would be flipped. I stepped forward without a word. Eric smiled, a bitter grin. David, thanks for being on time. We'll keep this brief. I didn't respond. Natalie stood beside me, fingers interlaced, eyes locked on her mother. Given the current situation, leadership has decided to restructure the business department. Some roles no longer align with the company's new direction, yours included. I looked Eric straight in the eye. And what's the real reason? Because I didn't clap after your speech? Or because I refused to redesign the office like some nightclub? Regina chuckled. Oh, David, don't be so emotional. You've done well for many years. But the company needs people with a more open mindset. Or people who know how to bow? Natalie snapped, her voice firmer than ever. Natalie, Regina narrowed her eyes. This isn't your business. If firing someone who's been with this company for more than 10 years isn't my business, then what is? Eric tapped the desk gently. Enough. David will receive a full severance package, considered an early retirement. No need to make this dramatic. Dramatic? I scoffed. You've turned this company into a ridiculous family drama, kicked people out like trash and called it restructuring. I don't want your money. I just regret ever believing this was where I belonged. Regina stood and walked slowly toward me. David, I think you've forgotten who you are in this company. You're not family, you're not a Carter. And thankfully, I never wanted to be. The air froze. Reed gave Eric a look, signaling it's time. Eric stood up. David Walker, effective today, you are no longer an employee of Carter Interiors. Natalie grabbed my hand. If you go, I go too. Suit yourself. Regina exhaled coldly. Maybe it's time you learn to fend for yourself. I turned to leave, but as I opened the door, I froze. In the hallway, a wheelchair was approaching, and the person sitting in it was none other than Mr. Charles Carter. My entire body stiffened. Natalie let go of my hand and rushed out. Dad. Charles gave a slight nod. Though noticeably thinner, his eyes remained sharp, glowing with an eerie clarity. Everyone be quiet. His voice was raspy but firm. My doctor only allowed me out for 1 hour, but that's enough to undo the damage you've done. Regina turned pale. Eric stood frozen like a statue. Reed stepped back. Charles, you should be resting. You no longer have the right to speak to me as my wife. He looked straight at Regina. I know everything. The secret meetings, the unnamed phone calls, the plan to replace the company's core. Did you think I had no eyes and ears? He turned to Eric. I gave you a chance, not because of merit, but because of fatherly love. And what did you do with it? Use it as a ticket to destroy the legacy I built? Eric stammered. I thought you weren't strong enough anymore. Wrong. I'm still more clear-headed than all of you put together. He motioned for Natalie to wheel him into the conference room. I stepped back to stand beside her. David, he called. I jumped slightly. Yes, sir. I haven't authorized your departure. You're staying. That's the decision of the official CEO, not a bunch of self-proclaimed clowns. The entire room went silent. A heavy stillness, like a blade cutting straight into the pride of Eric and Regina. And I, the man just sentenced to be thrown out, was being pulled back in as proof that justice was not yet dead. But I knew this was only the beginning. I never believed in miracles, but the moment Charles Carter appeared in that wheelchair in the third-floor hallway, I felt like I was witnessing something stronger than a miracle. Justice returning from the dead. No one could say a word. Regina, usually so skilled at twisting any situation to her advantage, stood paralyzed, as if nailed to the floor. Eric, pale as a sheet, gripped the armrest like letting go would make him collapse. Reed quickly stepped back, avoiding the icy glare scanning the room. Natalie pushed the wheelchair into the conference room. I hurried to hold the door, still in disbelief. "David." Charles gave a faint nod, voice raspy but every word crystal clear. "Thank you. For not bowing your head." I stood tall, my chest suddenly filled with air that had been squeezed out for days. He glanced at Eric, then locked eyes with Regina. I never handed over control to anyone. Eric was only acting CEO, and even that was never officially documented. Any action taken in my name since I was hospitalized is invalid. No one dared interrupt. No one had the courage. "I know everything. I know what you did while I was gone." His eyes were sharp as knives. Mass firings, bringing in outsiders, dismantling the company's structure, all to serve your personal agenda. Regina clenched her hands. "Charles, I only did it because I was worried about you. It all happened so suddenly, and the company needed someone to take the wheel. Then why did you place someone completely unqualified in the highest position, a boy who couldn't even remember how many branches he was responsible for?" Eric muttered weakly. "I was only trying to help. I thought you might not make it." "Thought? Are you running the company on instinct, or following the script your mother whispers to you every night?" No one responded. Charles turned to Reed. "You submit your resignation today, and don't ever set foot in this office again." Reed opened his mouth to protest, but after catching Natalie's look, he swallowed his words, nodded, and left quietly. Charles took a deep breath, then said, "From now on, every decision will be reevaluated. Anyone who was fired, if they wish, will be invited back, and those who harmed Carter Interiors," he looked directly at Regina and Eric, "will be held accountable." Regina stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Charles, I'm your wife. I've stood by you for 30 years. You can't treat me like this." "No, Regina. You chose to stand on the other side when you propped Eric up like a pawn. You betrayed my trust, not just as a wife, but as a business partner." Eric began to tremble. He stepped back, mumbling, "If you hadn't gotten sick, things would have turned out differently." Charles smirked. "And precisely because I'm still alive, you don't get to erase the past." Natalie gently squeezed his shoulder. "Dad, let me handle the rest. You need rest." "No, I still have something to say." He turned to me. "David, starting today, you're reinstated as head of sales. I'll be working directly with you. I need someone I can trust." I nodded, my throat tight. "I won't let you down." "Yeah, I know." "And Natalie," he looked at his daughter, eyes softening, "I should have let you take over from the start." Natalie said nothing, but I saw the corner of her eye well up. He turned to Eric one last time. "And, if you want to stay, start from the bottom, as a regular employee. If that's too much for you, you know where the door is." Eric didn't answer. His face slowly drained of color, like someone who'd just been stripped of everything. Regina reached to hold his hand, but he brushed her off. The first time he'd ever rejected the hand that had controlled his whole life. "I'll leave," Eric said, his voice hollow. Charles said nothing, just nodded. Regina looked around, searching for support, but no one offered any. Those who once followed her now bowed their heads in silence. After they left, Charles turned to me. "David, I never thought I'd have to say this, but thank you for not giving up when the company needed you most." I bowed my head. "It wasn't just me. Natalie fought to the very end, too." "I know. And I regret not seeing it sooner." The room was silent, but this time, not out of fear, but hope. The darkness had lifted, and light, however faint, had returned. I knew there would still be battles ahead, but at least now, we weren't fighting alone. 3 days after that fateful Judgment Day, Carter Interiors entered a transformation unlike anything in the company's history. Mr. Charles couldn't return to the office yet, but that didn't stop him from leading remotely. Every morning at 8 o'clock, Natalie made a video call from the hospital. He sat upright in bed, laptop open in front of him, paper spread across a rolling tray table. And I, from nearly being fired, was now personally assigned the first mission by Mr. Charles himself, to reopen the doors for those who had been unjustly cast out. "David," he said through the screen, eyes sharp as a blade, "you know exactly who should come back. You know who was pushed out for opposing Eric and Regina, not for lacking ability. Find them, call them, and if needed, apologize on my behalf." I didn't need a list. I didn't need a database. Those faces were burned into my mind, each one, every sigh, every bitter glance the day they silently left. The first person I called was Amy, the lead designer who'd been removed from a project simply because she didn't match Eric's aesthetic preferences. When she heard my voice over the phone, she went silent for nearly 30 seconds, then burst into tears. "Are you kidding me, David?" "No, I'm serious. Carter Interiors needs you. Mr. Charles needs you. The truth is, I need the company too." I never forgot how it felt to work somewhere I was truly seen. That day, she showed up at the office before I did. The second was Lucas, who had been demoted to the warehouse just for saying Eric wasn't qualified to present technical plans. When I called him, he replied with one sentence: "My mom." I never packed up my desk. 1 week later, we had restored nearly 80% of the original team. Not everyone was ready to return right away. Some had found new roles, some were still hesitant, but most, upon hearing, "Carpet Interiors is back in the hands of those who deserve it," he didn't hesitate. The atmosphere in the office slowly came back to life. The little kitchen at the end of the hallway echoed with laughter again. The once empty corridors were filled with familiar footsteps. Work emails were no longer met with silence. They flowed fast and steady, as if the chaos had never happened. Natalie worked like there was no tomorrow. She practically lived at the office, managing daily operations, coordinating closely with Mr. Charles via video calls, organizing new recruitment efforts, and personally reviewing every contract that had been canceled or delayed during Eric's leadership. I once asked her, while we were sipping coffee on the sixth-floor balcony, "How long do you plan to keep up this pace?" She didn't turn to me. Her eyes were fixed on the city skyline. "Until my father can walk into this office himself and see that what he built is still alive." I nodded. In that moment, I didn't see her as the CEO's daughter or my superior. She was a warrior, and I followed her willingly. On the ground floor, a recruitment board stood in the lobby. "We are rebuilding Carter Interiors. If you used to be here and were forced out, come back. If you never were, but believe in doing what's right, step in." The post spread on social media faster than expected. One of my own posts sharing the story, titled, "We built this company not on bloodlines but on merit," received more than 40,000 shares in just 3 days. People started calling Carter Interiors the company reborn from fire. But inside we knew it wasn't a miracle. It was simply the result of one thing: restoring trust. At the hospital, Mr. Charles began recovering faster than expected. After 1 week of physical therapy, he was able to stand. In the second week, he could walk a few steps with a cane, and on the 18th day since the incident, he told Natalie, "Cancel tomorrow's online meetings. I'm going to the office." Natalie blinked. "Are you sure, Dad? If I sit here any longer, the unfinished business will bury me alive." The next morning, at exactly 8:30, Mr. Charles appeared in the main lobby, not in a wheelchair, but with a blackwood cane and a slow, steady, commanding walk. Everyone in the company stood up, silent as he walked past. He stopped in the middle of the lobby, eyes scanning the familiar faces of those who had been called back. Then he looked at me. "David," he said, "I've made many mistakes, but keeping you here was the best decision I ever made." I didn't respond. I simply bowed my head, as a silent vow that I would never let him down. He turned to Natalie. "My daughter, from today on, Carter Interiors is yours." And for the first time in years, I saw Natalie cry. There is no court more terrifying than the silence of truth when it is placed in the light, with no curtain left to hide behind. Just 3 days after Mr. Charles officially returned to the company, the internal investigation he had ordered began. Quietly, but as sharp as a razor. No desk pounding, no dramatic firings, just emails sent. private meetings with legal counsel, and stacks of thick folders delivered straight to the fifth-floor office, an area only Natalie and I were allowed to enter. And then the truth began to leak, piece by piece. The first name called was Ethan Moore, a former marketing employee whom I'd watched leapfrog into the role of director of communications in under 6 months, despite having only a college degree and 2 years as a cafe manager. Ethan disappeared from the company shortly after Mr. Charles was hospitalized, leaving no message, but through the accounting system we discovered off-the-books bonuses approved during Mr. Charles's absence, signed by Eric, but routed to Ethan. When Natalie requested a deeper dive, the legal department uncovered personal emails between Ethan and Regina Carter. There was no doubt anymore. She had used her influence to insert her lover into the company, promote him against policy, and even discussed merging departments just to expand Ethan's power, all while Mr. Charles lay unconscious in a hospital bed. On Monday morning, Mr. Charles issued an internal order. Effective immediately, Mrs. Regina Carter is no longer permitted to enter any Carter Interiors facility. The order was short, not angry, not dramatic, but more ruthless than any court sentence. As for Eric, things unfolded even more tragically. Since Mr. Charles revoked his executive authority, Eric became a ghost in the house, never showing up at the office, never responding to emails, never joining meetings. I heard from the cleaning staff that he just wanders in his room, refusing to see anyone. At first, Mr. Charles kept Eric on the employee roster under the title Market Development Specialist, a final gesture of mercy for his own blood. But after 3 weeks of no reports, no participation, and no work, Mr. Charles made his decision. Eric Carter, effective today, is terminated from Carter Interiors. I was present when he signed the document. His hand trembled slightly, but there was no hesitation. My son had a chance. He didn't take it. I can't keep a shadow on the payroll just because he shares my last name. Natalie said nothing, just handed him the investigation file. Inside were records of Eric's absences, HR testimonies, and security camera photos, Eric receiving a paycheck but not working a single day since being demoted. That afternoon, an office clerk confirmed delivery of the official termination letter to the Carter family residence. But an hour later, Regina called the office. For the first time since her ban, her voice no longer had the calm that once made people shrink. "Charles, are you really going to push your son and me to this point?" "I'm not pushing anyone. I'm just cleaning up the mess others left behind." "Eric has nowhere to go. He's never worked anywhere outside this company. You want him out on the street?" "No. I want him to learn how to stand on his own, like everyone else." "He's 30 years old, Regina. He's not the baby you once carried." After that call, Mr. Charles hung up and sighed, but this time, there was no sadness, only exhaustion. Natalie walked in and sat beside him. "Are you okay, Dad?" "I'm okay, because for the first time in my life, I'm no longer blinded by emotion." 2 weeks later, the local paper published a short piece. Regina Carter and her son Eric are currently residing in the suburbs of Bastrop, living with her older brother, Mr. Harold Wilson. It is reported that their home in downtown Austin has been listed for sale to pay off debts. Everyone at the company knew, but no one gossiped, no one mocked, because even though they had hurt many, the price they paid wasn't humiliation, it was being forgotten. And that, perhaps, is the harshest punishment. During an internal meeting where I was presenting a new market expansion plan, Mr. Charles looked at me and suddenly said, "David, if one day I'm no longer here, I want my daughter to have someone like you beside her." The room fell silent. I didn't know what to say. Natalie just looked straight at me, unflinching, unhidden. For the first time after everything, I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was someone who stayed, who witnessed, who fought, and who was ready to start over, from the very place that once tried to push me out. 3 months after Mr. Charles Carter returned to the company on his own 2 feet, Carter Interiors entered its most stable period since I first walked in 11 years ago. Meetings were no longer power struggles. Project plans were no longer edited to please someone's ego. Every decision, even the smallest, was based on actual value, not favoritism or the Carter name. And the name Natalie Carter was no longer followed by the owner's daughter. She was now officially and deservedly recognized as vice president. And me. I was appointed director of sales after the quarterly review, with Mr. Charles giving one short comment during the announcement. David isn't just someone who doesn't give up. He's someone who knows who he's fighting for. I never needed a title to feel worthy, but sitting in that chair, looking at the old team now elevated to strategic partners, I realized sometimes being allowed to stay is the greatest reward. We worked a lot, a whole lot. But in the rare, quiet moments between emails and looming deadlines, Natalie and I found a new kind of silence. One that wasn't the same as before. It started with Friday lunchtime chess matches, like when Mr. Charles was still in the hospital, and we'd sneak in a quick game in his office before meetings. "Don't go easy on me," Natalie used to say whenever I winced after losing my knight. "Yeah, you think I'd dare?" I laughed. If someone like you needs pity moves, no one would play chess anymore. Then came the late evenings when the office was dim and nearly empty. I'd knock gently on her door. "Coffee or herbal tea?" "Tea, but with honey," she'd reply without looking up. "You still remember?" I don't make a habit of forgetting what matters. We weren't in a rush, no confessions, no labels, but both of us knew, through shared glances that didn't need words, through nods that didn't need debate, we were slowly stepping toward each other. One night, after dinner at a sushi place Mr. Charles once recommended, Natalie looked at me, her voice soft like sake. "Do you think, if things hadn't been so chaotic, we'd be here now?" I looked her in the eye. "Think if things had been calm, I wouldn't have known how fiercely you could fight." She chuckled. "And if I hadn't been broken, I wouldn't have known who'd still be standing beside me when everything fell apart." The company was no longer just a workplace. It had become a place worth coming home to. The bulletin board on the first floor was replaced. No more flashy gala photos from Eric's time, but candid ones, staff laughing near the coffee machine, engineers checking blueprints by the window, Mr. Charles and Natalie cutting the ribbon at a new Dallas branch. Every Friday, we spent the last 15 minutes of the day recognizing even the smallest contributions, from project managers to warehouse workers. No more hierarchy, no more off-limit zones, no more us versus them. Carter Interiors was no longer a family-owned business. It was a team, a collective that stood up, made things right, and started over together. One afternoon, after a long meeting, Mr. Charles invited me into his office. He still used a cane, but his steps were much steadier now. "You know, David," he began, "I once feared I'd die without seeing my daughter truly become a leader." I smiled. "And how do you feel now?" "I feel at peace, but I've realized something else." "What's that?" "That if she has someone beside her, someone brave, steady, and quietly loyal, she'll never have to walk alone." I looked at him. My heartbeat skipped. "David, I'm not pressuring you. I'm just saying, my daughter doesn't need a hero. She just needs someone who stays." I left his office, my mind spinning from what I'd just heard. That night, Natalie invited me over for dinner. Nothing fancy, a plate of pasta and 2 glasses of wine. She wore a beige sweater, her hair tied loosely, and for the first time, no laptop on the table. We talked like ordinary people, about movies, about food, about the trip she'd always dreamed of but never took because she was always busy. Then, as I was getting ready to leave, she walked me to the door, stood there for a moment, then said, "You once said, you don't forget important things, right?" "Yeah." "Living with my mom. Man, don't forget tonight." She didn't need to explain, and I didn't need to ask. I don't know what the future holds. I can't promise everything will always go smoothly, but I do know this. Some things, when built with trust and time, don't break easily. Like Carter Interiors, and maybe like us. David's story isn't just about overcoming injustice. It's proof that in a world full of schemes and manipulation, integrity and steadfastness still matter. He didn't need power to earn respect, nor blood ties to be kept. He stayed because he deserved to. When justice returned, no one needed to shout. They only needed to stand firm, speak the truth, and never bow. And sometimes the greatest reward isn't a title. It's being beside someone who truly knows your worth. What do you think about David's journey and the transformation at Carter Interiors? Would you have stayed like he did or walked away after betrayal? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories.